Hey guys, my name is Moran Pober. I'm the founder and CEO of Acquisitions.com. We're the largest community of roll-up and M&A entrepreneurs and investors. I'm listening to tons of audiobooks. That's how I consume like 80% of my books. And I thought it would be awesome to listen to audiobooks while giving you the commentary on my thoughts when it comes to things related to business, acquisitions, roll-ups, things like that. So this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take a book by Stephen Schwarzman, which is actually founder and CEO of Blackstone, one of, if not the largest private equity firm in the world. I'm going to listen to it. It's going to be on double speed, so if you don't like it, just slow the video. I know you can do that on YouTube. Anytime I have something to say that I think can add value to the audio, then I'll pause it and I'll let you know what I think. I'll see what that looks like. Probably going to do a chapter by chapter. And let me know in the comments below if you like that. So I listened to this book already, but I thought it would be worth doing a second time with giving commentaries. So with that being said, let's get to it.
Schwarzman's Curtains and Linens sat beneath the elevated train in the middle-class Frankfurt section of Philadelphia, selling draperies, bedding, towels, and other household goods. The store was busy, the product's good, the price is fair, and the customer's loyal. My father, who had inherited the business from my grandfather, was knowledgeable and friendly. He was happy running the business just as it was. For all his intelligence and hard work, he had no ambition to move beyond his comfort zone. I started working at the store when I was 10 years old for 10 cents an hour.
This is big, right? You don't want a bigger store. You don't want to move outside his comfort zone. Isn't it like the trap of all entrepreneurs, right? We all got to move outside our comfort zone, otherwise we're just going to stay where we are. The results you really want is behind your fear, behind your comfort zone.
I soon asked my grandfather for a raise to 25 cents an hour. He refused. What makes you think you're worth 25 cents an hour? I wasn't actually. When a customer came in with window measurements and wanted to know how much fabric she needed for drapes, I wouldn't have the foggiest idea how to figure it out, or what to tell her, or even the desire to learn. During the Christmas season, I was put in charge of selling linen handkerchiefs to elderly ladies on Friday nights and Saturdays. I'd spend hours opening box after box of nearly identical handkerchiefs, none costing more than $1, and then pack them all away again once the customer had made her choice or rejected everything after 5 or 10 minutes. It felt like a waste of time. In my 4 years as an employee, I evolved from a grumpy child to an argumentative teenager. I was particularly upset about the toll this job was taking on my social life. Instead of attending football games and high school dances, I was stuck at the store, cut off from the world I wanted to be a part of. But while I could never master gift wrapping, I could see the potential for Schwarzman's to grow. The greatest generation had returned from World War II. We were in an era of extraordinary peace and affluence. Homes were being built, suburbs were expanding, and the birth rate was spiking. That meant more bedrooms, more bathrooms, and more demand for linens. What were we doing with one store in Philadelphia? When America thought linens, it should be thinking Schwarzman's Curtains and Linens. I could imagine our stores from coast to coast like today's Bed Bath & Beyond. That was a vision I could fold hankies for. My father disagreed. Okay, I said, we could just expand all over Pennsylvania. No, he said, I don't think I want to do that. How about Philadelphia? That couldn't be too difficult. I'm not really interested. How can you not be interested? I said. We have all these people who come into the store. We could be like Sears, which was prosperous and ubiquitous at that point. Why don't you want to do this? People will steal from the cash register. Dad, they're not going to steal from the cash register.
This is fascinating. So many thoughts I have here, right? Like, first of all, aren't all of us like being built because of our parents? So it sounds like right away, like Stephen Schwarzman was basically kind of like thinking differently than his father. He had a bigger vision. His father was just thinking, hey, I'm good where I'm at. I'm making enough money. And I guess that internal fight in the family, what was created an opportunity for Stephen Schwarzman to really, prove himself and do something bigger. It's fascinating seeing that, okay, the father don't want to go big. Stephen Schwarzman want to go big, but the father won't allow it. And I think all of us are either try to be exactly like our parents or the 100% opposite of it, right? It sounds like what happened here.
Why don't you want to expand? We could be huge.
And also showing you, I wonder why the father didn't expand. He didn't expand because he had a fear to expand, or he didn't expand because he was just like satisfied with it, where he's at, right? Interesting scenarios.
I'm a very happy man. We have a nice house. We have 2 cars.
There you go. He's very happy, right? He's good enough. He's content, which again, is nothing wrong. Like when we work with people on acquisitions, some people just want to buy one business and have a great lifestyle, and that's it. And some people just want to buy all the businesses in the world, which is kind of like what Stephen Schwarzman did with Blackstone.
I have enough money to send you and your brothers to college. What more do I need? It isn't about what you need. It's about wants. I don't want it. I don't need it. That will not make me happy. I shook my head. I don't understand. This is a sure thing. Today, I understand. You can learn to be a manager. You can even learn to be a leader. But you can't learn to be an entrepreneur. My mother, Arlene, was restless and ambitious, a great compliment to my father. She saw our family coming up in the world.
You can't learn to be an entrepreneur. It's interesting, right? An entrepreneur is someone who's willing to jump into his fears, to have the courage.
She once decided to learn to sail. I suppose she imagined us like the Kennedys, hair blowing in the salt breeze off Hyannisport. So she bought a 20-foot sailboat, learned to sail it, and entered us in races. Mom at the helm, Dad doing as he was told. She won lots of trophies. My twin brothers and I always admired her competitiveness and will to win. In a different era, she would have been CEO of a major corporation. We lived in a semi-detached stone and brick house in Oxford Circle, an almost entirely Jewish neighborhood of Philadelphia. And I grew up playing on the playgrounds littered with broken glass bottles, surrounded by kids smoking. The father of one of my best friends, who lived across the street, was killed by the mafia. My mother didn't like seeing me with the guys in black leather jackets who hung out at the bowling lanes along Castor Avenue. She wanted better schools for us. So not long after I started junior high, she decided to move us out to the more affluent suburbs. In Huntington Valley, Jews were a rarity, about 1% of the population. Most people were white, Episcopalian, or Catholic, happy with their place in the world. I found everything there incredibly easy. No one was trying to hurt or threaten me.
That's cool to hear. Stephen Schwarzman is a Jew. So am I. So I guess I can compete with Stephen Schwarzman on Blackstone.
I did well academically and led the state championship track team. In the 1960s, the United States felt like the economic and social center of the world. Everything from civil rights to sex to attitudes toward war was changing. as the United States escalated its involvement in Vietnam. I was part of the first generation to grow up seeing the president on television all the time. Our leaders were not mythical figures. They were accessible to people like us. Even Abington High School became part of this change during my sophomore year. Every morning at school, in accordance with Pennsylvania state law, we listened to verses from the Bible and said the Lord's Prayer. I didn't mind, but Ellery Shemp's family did. They were Unitarians and felt that the school's Christian emphasis violated their rights under the First and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. The Shemp case reached the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled 8-1 that the Pennsylvania prayer statute was unconstitutional. The case put Abington High School at the center of a national debate, with many Christians arguing that this case was the beginning of the end for their religion in public schools. At the end of my junior year, I was elected president of the student council. In that position, I first experienced what it means to be an innovator. My father may have vetoed my idea to turn Schwarzman's linens into the first Bed Bath & Beyond, but now I was in charge of something of my own. The summer between my junior and senior years,
You see that everything is going back to his father. It's just fascinating to see how all of us are just being built based on our surrounding, based on, like, that's why there's the sentence that says, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Show me the way your parents like raised you, I'll show you your future. And it's exactly what's happening here. Just, I love it that he's sharing that. It's so cool.
we took a family car trip to California. I sat in the back seat with my mother driving, the warm air blowing in my face, imagining what I could create with my new position. I didn't want to be just another name on a long list of student leaders. I wanted to do something that no one else had done or even thought to do. I wanted to develop a vision that was so exciting that the whole school would rally to help make it happen. As we drove from coast to coast and back, I scribbled notes on postcards to my fellow officers of the student council, random ideas, which I would mail every time we stopped. They were all at home, lounging around, getting this blizzard of cards, while I was in search of a great idea. It finally came to me as we were driving. Philadelphia was the home of American Bandstand, a television show for teenagers hosted by Dick Clark. The city also had really wonderful radio stations like WDAS, one of the leading African-American radio stations in the country. I listened to music obsessively, from James Brown to Motown, the great doo-wop groups of the 1950s, then the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. At school, I could barely walk the halls without hearing the student rock groups practicing the songs they heard in the bathrooms and stairwells, wherever the acoustics were good. One of their favorites was Tears on My Pillow by Little Anthony and the Imperials. That was the sound and emotion of high school. Tears on my pillow, pain in my heart. How great would it be, I asked myself, if we could get Little Anthony and the Imperials to come to school and perform in our gym? Sure, they lived in Brooklyn and were one of the most popular groups in the country at the time, and we had no money. But why not? It would be unique. Everyone would love it. There had to be a way, and I made it my job to figure out how. 50 years on, the details are hazy, but there were a lot of phone calls, a lot of whose dad knows whom, and at the end of it, Little Anthony and the Imperials came to Abington High School. I can still hear the music, see the band on stage, and feel everyone having a great time. If you want something badly enough, you can find a way. You can create it out of nothing, and before you know it, there it is. But wanting something isn't enough. If you're going to pursue difficult goals, you're inevitably going to fall short sometimes. It's one of the costs of ambition.
It's fascinating. He's literally giving you the keys to success here, right? Everyone will fail. You got to think big. I love it that he's also a leader from like a young age, right? Ask yourself, were you a leader in a young age? Can you build your confidence based on that, based on your history? Even if it's from school, you can hear it in his voice. He's like, that's how I built that's where it started.
Jack Armstrong, my track coach at Abington, was medium height, medium build, with gray hair swept back behind his ears. Every day he wore the same maroon sweatshirt and windbreaker, the same stopwatch and a lanyard around his neck. And every day he brought the same positive, cheerful demeanor to work. He never shouted or got angry, just raised or lowered his voice within a narrow range, the slightest change in cadence to get his point across. Look at what those guys have just done. And you're making pretend you're working out. There wasn't a day I didn't throw up after practice, sick from the effort. One day he'd make the sprinters run a mile, far more than we liked. We'd tell him what we thought, but we knew we were in the hands of a genius. We wanted to please him. Even during winter, he didn't let up. He'd make us run lap after lap around the school parking lot, set on a hill and whipped by the wind. We kept our heads down to make sure we didn't slip on the ice. He stood against the wall, bundled up in his coat, hat, and gloves, smiling and clapping us on. Our high school had no special facilities, but while our rival teams were doing nothing during the winter, we were training in harsh conditions. When spring came, we were ready. We never lost a meet. Whether he was coaching future Olympians or boys joining in from the bench, Coach Armstrong treated all of us the same, communicating a simple and consistent message. Run as well as you can to satisfy the demands of the training schedule he designed. He didn't terrorize or cheerlead. He let us figure out what we wanted. In his entire career, his teams lost just 4 times, 186-4. In 1963, we were the Pennsylvania state champions in the mile relay and invited to compete in a special event in New York City at the 168th Street Armory. On the bus ride there, I sat as usual next to my best friend, Bobby Bryant, a 6-foot African-American superstar. Bobby was so warm and kind that it would take him forever to get through the school cafeteria because he had to stop and joke with every table. School was a struggle for him academically, but on the track, he was magic. His family never had much money, so I bought him a pair of Adidas spikes with the money I made working. It was a gesture of friendship, but also more than that. Bobby running in a great pair of spikes made all of us look good. 6 teams lined up in the final. I always ran the first leg, and I never passed the baton in second place. When the gun went off, I broke out in front. But coming around the first curve, I felt my right hamstring rip. The pain was sudden and excruciating. I had a choice. I could pull over and stop, the sensible choice for my body, or I could continue and find a way to keep us as close as I could and give us a chance to win. I drifted to the middle of the track, forcing the runners behind me to find a way around. I gritted through the remaining distance, choking down the pain and watching my competitors sprint ahead. I passed the baton to our second leg runner 20 yards behind the leader. I limped to the infield, bent over, and vomited. I had done all I could, but there was no way we could make up the distance. I had imagined victory and worked ferociously to ensure it. I had put in those hard and lonely laps through the winter. Now, I was certain we would lose. But as I stood there, my hands on my knees, I heard the crowd stirring, shouts bouncing off the brick walls. My teammate running the second leg was starting to gain. Then our third runner closed the gap further. The spectators in the balcony took off their shoes and started banging them on the metal panels lining the track. After the third leg, the gap was down to 12 yards, still a huge distance to make up. Brooklyn Boys High School had their best runner, the best runner in the city, waiting to grab the baton. Ollie Hunter was 6 feet 3 inches tall with a shaved head, wide shoulders, a tapered waist, and extremely long legs, perfectly engineered to run. He had never been beaten in any competition. Our final leg runner was Bobby. I watched Bobby take off on the flat wooden armory floor, his eyes wild with intensity, focused on Hunter's back. Stride by stride, he reeled him in. I knew Bobby better than anyone else, but even I couldn't tell where he got that combination of spirit and strength from. Right at the tape, he lunged forward to win. He did it. The crowd went wild. How could that possibly have happened? It had been a superhuman effort. Afterward, he came over to me in the infield. He put his big arms around me and hugged me. I did it for you, Steve. I couldn't let you down. Training and competing together, we made each other better.
Right? Find a partner to work with. Find a partner to keep you accountable, to push you.
During my senior year, I realized that Harvard was the best-known Ivy League university in America. I believed that my record merited my admission. As it turned out, Harvard didn't agree. They put me on the wait list. Coach Armstrong suggested I go to Princeton to run track and even arranged for it. Like a petulant teenager, I said no because I thought Princeton wanted me just for my athletic ability. I won a place at Yale, but Harvard was a fixation, part of the vision I had for myself. So I decided to call the head of admissions at Harvard and convince him to admit me. I found his name and the central phone number for the admissions department. I brought a pile of quarters with me to school to use in the payphone. I didn't want my parents to hear me make the call. It was something I needed to do on my own. I was practically shaking with fear as I dropped the coins into the phone, one by one. Hello, I'm Stephen Schwarzman from Abington High School in Abington, Pennsylvania. I've been accepted by Yale, but I'm on your waiting list and I'd really like to go to Harvard. How did you get to me? Asked the dean. I never talk with students or parents.
How good is that? Doing cold call right away, right? And that's, I'm sure, like I'm almost sure that I remember even, like when he started Blackstone, that was pretty much the process for him to get billion-dollar investors eventually, right? So to go out there, just reach out to people, outreach to people. And I love it that he's sharing a story here from, young age, doing the same pretty much.
I asked for you and they put me through. I'm sorry to say we're not taking anyone from the waiting list this year. The freshman class is full. That's really a mistake, I said. I'm going to be very successful and you'll be very happy that you accepted me at Harvard.
Believing in himself, right? I'm going to be very successful.
I'm sure you'll be successful, but Yale is a lovely place and you'll enjoy it and have a good experience there. I'm sure I will, I said, persisting, but I'm calling because I want to go to Harvard. I understand that, but I won't be able to help you. I hung up the phone and practically collapsed. I had overestimated my ability to sell myself. I accepted my rejection and resigned myself to my second choice, Yale. In the final speech I made as student council president, I laid out a philosophy on education that has remained remarkably consistent throughout my life. I believe that education is a discipline. The object of this discipline is to learn how to think. Once we have mastered this, we can use it to learn a vocation, appreciate art, or read a book. Education simply enables us to appreciate the ever-changing drama fashioned of God's own hand, life itself. Education continues when we leave the classroom. Our associations with friends, our participation in clubs, all increase our store of knowledge. In fact, we never stop learning until we die. My fellow officers and I just hope that you will become aware of the purpose of education.
How many great life lessons, right? We never stop learning until we die. It's so good. And that's, again, one of the reasons why at such an age is still like working so hard, dealing with philanthropies. When I'm listening to books, those are the things that I'm looking at. What are the beliefs of that person? What are the actions that he took? What's the attitude? What's the vibe, right? I'm not here to just listen to a story. I'm here to learn. That's why I want you to go through the experience with me to see what that looks like.
And follow its basic tenets, questioning and thinking for the rest of your life.
Question, thinking, always question things around you. Can you do it better?
That summer, as my father drove me back from summer camp where I had been a counselor, he told me that I was entering a world he knew nothing about. He knew no one at Yale or anyone who had been to Yale. The only help he could give me in this new world was to love me and let me know I could always come home. Other than that, I was on my own. Freshman year at Yale, I shared 2 bedrooms and a study with 2 roommates. Luckily, I got the single bedroom. One of my roommates was a private schoolboy from Baltimore who pinned a Nazi flag to our living room wall. He had a glass case where he kept Nazi medals and other paraphernalia from the Third Reich. Every night, we went to sleep to the sound of an album called Hitler's Marching Army. My other roommate didn't change his underwear for practically the entire first semester. College was a real adjustment for me. Commons at Yale is a soaring brick building in the middle of campus. It was constructed in 1901 for Yale's 200th anniversary. It seemed like a train station full of hundreds of people eating. Plates, cutlery, and trays clattering on the tables, chairs scraping backward on the floor. The moment I walked in on my first day, I stopped and thought, something's terribly wrong. It didn't sound anything like the cafeteria at Abington. It took me a moment to figure it out. There were no women. At Abington, I had known everyone. At Yale in fall 1965, there were 10,000 students, of whom 4,000 were undergraduates. I didn't know a single one. 2 crazy roommates, no girls, and nobody I knew. The loneliness was crushing. Everything and everyone intimidated me. Although I had told Coach Armstrong I didn't want to go to Princeton to run, the irony was that I'd gotten into Yale because of my sprinting. I had one of the fastest 100-yard times in Pennsylvania and ran leadoff for Abington state champion 440 and 880-yard relay teams, which were 4th in the United States. I had the good grades and SAT scores, but I was admitted to run. Yale had a famous coach at the time, Bob Giegengai, who had coached the U.S. Olympic team the year before. New runners went to practice, took a card detailing their routine, and then ran alone. There was no Coach Armstrong to bring out your best. There were no teammates to laugh and joke with, and no one for whom you'd ever run until you vomited. I figured the best I could do was win an Ivy League sprint title. To do that, though, I'd have to train for a lackluster coach and a team that didn't seem to care about me. So, uncharacteristically, I quit. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but track, which had been such a formative part of my life, no longer seemed the way to get there. Academically, I discovered I was underprepared, chose an unusual major, culture and behavior, an academic creation of the 1960s that combined psychology, sociology, biology, and anthropology. I chose it because it sounded fascinating, a comprehensive study of the human being, which would help me understand people's objectives and motivations. But I still had a way to go on the basics. There were only 8 of us in the class, and 4 professors assigned to teach us. Many of my peers came from the best prep schools in the country. Not only did they all seem to know each other, they also knew the work. My first English paper was on Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener. I got a 68. I then got a 66 on my second. I was failing. My instructor, Alistair Wood, asked me to his garret office for a meeting. He was a young man dressed like an elderly professor, wearing a tweed sweater and a J-Press sport jacket with patches at the elbows, a tattersall shirt, and a green knit tie. Mr. Schwarzman, I want to talk to you about your papers. There's really nothing to talk about, I said. Why is that? I had nothing to say, and I said it poorly. My God, you're not stupid. I couldn't have put it any better myself. So I have to teach you to write, and after that, I'll teach you how to think. Because you can't learn both at the same time.
Self-awareness, right? So good. He knows when he's not good at something. And he's willing to admit that he can be better.
I'll give you the answers to the next several essays, and we'll concentrate on the writing. Then we'll concentrate on thinking. He saw I had potential and systematically set about equipping me with what I needed. I'll never forget his patience and kindness. Teaching, I came to believe, is about more than sharing knowledge. You have to remove the obstacles in people's way. In my case, the obstacle was the gap between my education up to that point and the education of my peers. That year, I went from failing to the dean's list at the top of my class. After my freshman year, I needed an adventure, something different from the typical summer job. A summer at sea, I thought. Stopping in exotic ports might prove a useful cure to the all-male campus at Yale. I started by trying to get a job at the docks in New York City, but the Longshoremen's Union, then controlled by the mob, wouldn't take an unconnected college kid. They recommended I go to the Scandinavian Seamen's Union in Brooklyn. The money wouldn't be as good, they warned me, but at least there might be work. I got there shortly before the union building closed for the day and found a wall covered in 3x5-inch note cards advertising jobs. I was qualified for none of them. But the receptionist said that if I joined the union, I could have a place to sleep and see if there was anything tomorrow. I took him up on his offer, but my night was interrupted by a giant Scandinavian sailor who tried to get into bed with me. I freaked out, fled, and slept on the street. When the sun rose, I went to a Baptist church across the street for the morning service and waited until the union hall reopened. The notice board had been rearranged, and I spotted a card that said simply, Destination Unknown. I asked the receptionist what that could mean. He told me that it all depended on the cargo. You found out where you were going as you sailed onto the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. If you turned left, you were going to Canada, right for the Caribbean or Latin America, and straight ahead for Europe. All that was available was a job as an engine room wiper, the lowest rank aboard a Norwegian tanker. I took it. My job was to keep the engine room clean from grease. As we went under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, we turned right, headed for Trinidad and Tobago. All we had to eat and drink was smoked fish, awful cheese, and Ringness beer. It was so hot in the engine room that I could drink a beer and watch it seep out of my body on my skin. When I wasn't working, I read the works of Sigmund Freud, which I brought with me in a wooden crate. Every last one of his books. The Norwegian crew and I didn't have much to say to each other.
Reading Sigmund Freud from a young age, that's interesting.
But they were there for me when it counted. In a bar in Trinidad, I spoke to the wrong girl.
And this is another thing. As soon as I hear something like that, I'm like, he's listening to reading Sigmund Freud. I'm like, okay, let's check Sigmund Freud books. See, maybe I should read ones too. Because show me the books that someone read, show me the people that he hanged out with, and I'll show you the person.
And soon punches and cheers were flying, like an old Western saloon fight, as my crewmates rallied to my defense. After we sailed north to Providence, Rhode Island, I took a bus back to Brooklyn in search of another job. I was hired onto a much more pleasant ship, a freighter, the Danish Kirstenskau, smartly painted in white with blue trim. My job there was second cook. I would wake up at 4 a.m., bake the bread, and cook breakfast. I loved it. We turned left toward Canada, picked up liquor and lumber, and sailed to Colombia for bananas. Every time we stopped in a port, the ship had to be loaded and unloaded using nets. There were no containers then, and the whole process would take 3 or 4 days, giving me time to explore. In Santa Marta, I spent an evening in a bar on the beach that was lit with Christmas lights. For the only, first and last time in my life, I got so drunk I passed out. Later, someone drove me to the docks and dropped me there. After 2 days, I awoke back on the boat, covered in bruises. I must have been robbed and beaten. My crewmates had found me and had taken turns watching over me until I woke up. By the time I regained consciousness, we were out at sea, and I could barely walk. We kept on to Cartagena, through the Panama Canal to Buenaventura. And then I had to get back to Yale. It was a jolt to be back in drab New Haven after 3 months at sea. On the front page of the Yale Daily News, I saw an advertisement saying that if you were feeling depressed, you should see the psychiatrist at DUH, the Department of University Health. I decided to give it a go. The psychiatrist looked the part with a pipe and a bow tie. I told him about my summer, about the ships, the girls, the ports, and how I didn't want to be back at school.
It's funny to hear a guy like that you see now in an older age, very wealthy, very smart, very, on point. Used to be just a younger guy who party and get drunk. So it's just really awesome to hear. We have different periods in life to go through.
You don't need therapy. You're just suffering from withdrawal. Hang in there. In a few months, you'll be fine. He turned out to be right. Maybe it was the Freud or the bars or the girls I had met along the way. Maybe it was having taken on a challenge and survived. While my classmates were spending the summer hitting tennis balls and working in offices, I had been sweating in an engine room and dodging blows in Colombian bars. But now, I was ready to approach Yale on my own terms. I moved to Davenport College, one of Yale's residential colleges, where a future president, George W. Bush, was a year ahead of me. The dining room was much smaller than Commons, so instead of going back to my room or the library straight after lunch or dinner to study, I would pour myself a cup of coffee and sit down with any students there and join in the conversation. To make spending money, I took over the Yale stationery concession and walked every stairway in the entire university trying to get students to buy writing paper with personalized letterhead. With the money I made, I bought myself a stereo. I love listening to music. I set my sights on the senior societies, secretive clubs whose members included the most prominent students on campus, the captains of the sports teams, the editors of student publications, the leaders of the Whiffenpoofs, an a cappella group. The clubs had mysterious names like Stolen Bones, Scroll and Key, Wolf's Head, Book and Snake. Tap to join, you swore never to mention it or speak about what went on behind the club's closed doors. Skull and Bones was the most exclusive. I had 2 years before my senior year to get its members' attention. I'd often go and sit on a bench in the courtyard of Branford College, the prettiest college at Yale, where I could listen to the carillon of Harkness Tower and think, what can I do that would get the whole undergraduate body excited? Something inventive. One of my more unusual achievements had been to set the university's vertical jump record, 42 inches, during the physical exam we took when we arrived. But I knew there was more I could do, and my experience at Abington with little Anthony had taught me a lesson I have replicated throughout my life. If you're going to commit yourself to something, it's as easy to do something big as it is to do something small. Both will consume your time and energy, so make sure your fantasy is worthy of your pursuit, with rewards commensurate to your effort. The most glaring need I sensed among Yale's undergraduates was the companionship of women. There were thousands of men in neo-Gothic buildings starved of even the sight of women, let alone their company. It was an obvious problem to solve, but nobody was trying. I decided to change things. When I was 16, my parents had taken me to the ballet to see Rudolf Nureyev dance with Margot Fonteyn. Their grace and movement captivated me. Later, still a teenager, I was immobilized for a month with a badly separated shoulder. I listened to record after record of classical music, 10 hours a day, starting with Gregorian chants and ending with the great ballet scores of Tchaikovsky. When I arrived at Yale, Mary Jane Bancroft, the wife of my college dean, Horace Taft, the grandson of President Taft, discovered my interest in ballet. She shared books with me and taught me a lot. I asked myself, so what if I took my interest in ballet, bolted it to my social ambitions, and brought a troupe of ballerinas to perform for Yale's men? That would get me noticed. I needed an organization, so I invented the Davenport Ballet Society. Then I started calling the heads of the dance departments at the all-women Seven Sisters colleges, inviting their dancers to perform at the Davenport Ballet Society Dance Festival. 5 of them agreed. Finally, I called Walter Terry, an eminent newspaper dance critic, and persuaded him to travel from New York to review the festival. Out of nothing, I brought together dancers, critics, and an audience. My hunch about the Yale men proved right. We packed them in, and I had the beginnings of a profile on campus. If we could get the best dancers from other colleges, why not shoot for the professionals? The greatest ballet company in the world at the time was the New York City Ballet, where George Balanchine was artistic director.
Look at this. If we want to shoot for the best dancer, why not go for the professionals? Like, I'm thinking right away, okay, in Blackstone, that's why he's always trying to hire the best people, the best talent, right? And from young age, he's like, hey, if we go for something, let's go for the best. Same for his goals, same for the people that he's hiring. If we do something, let's just do the best of it, which is awesome to hear. Again, from young age, he had that.
The train to New York and hung around the stage door waiting for the security guard to take a break. When he did, I ducked into the offices backstage and asked until I found the manager. What the hell are you doing back here? He demanded. I'm from the Yale University Ballet Society, and we want to invite the New York City Ballet to come to New Haven to perform. I'd given some thought to what was in this proposal for him. The students don't have money, but they love ballet, and they're your future audience and patrons. I kept talking until the manager caved. Look, he said, we can't bring the whole company up. Would it be okay if we just bring a small group? Absolutely fine, I told him. So a New York City Ballet group came to New Haven to perform. Another big hit. Now that I had a relationship with the New York City Ballet, I upped the stakes again and went back to the manager. We're just a bunch of poor college students, hundreds and hundreds of college kids who love ballet. Why don't you let us come to a performance for free? Because we can't afford tickets. We can't do that, he told me. We depend on selling tickets. But we do dress rehearsals, so if you want to bring down as many students as you want to a dress rehearsal of the Nutcracker, we can arrange that. So they arranged it on their end, and I took care of it on ours, inviting all the women's colleges. We filled the house for a dress rehearsal of the Nutcracker. Men from Yale, women from the women's colleges. By the time it was over, I had become a student ballet impresario, sort of the Saul Hurok of Yale. I was developing a reputation as someone who made the improbable happen. Around the same time, I learned that Yale's efforts to recruit more students from the inner cities were floundering, just as they were at most of the other Ivy League universities at that time. I went to the admissions team with an idea. Despite its best intentions, Yale did not have enough people on the admissions staff to reach all the parts of America.
Coming up with ideas, going to Yale headquarters, bringing these ideas, always taking initiative, right? It's freaking like this guy sounds like from young age, he's just a superstar.
If they couldn't get out to the cities, towns, and rural areas far beyond New Haven, they could not describe a Yale education or what it offered. Many potential candidates didn't apply because they never imagined they could fit in, let alone afford it. My idea was to send out small groups of students and invite candidates to visit at Yale's expense. Instead of the college going to them, they would come to us. While we had them on campus, we could explain Yale's generous financial aid program. No one was ever turned down for lack of money. The dean liked my idea. We decided to start in my hometown, Philadelphia. It would be a pilot project, the first of its kind attempted by a major university. On my first visit to South Philadelphia High School, I met a boy who had been born in Cairo and forced to leave because he was Jewish. He had moved to France, then Italy, and finally to the United States 5 years earlier. He had high standardized test scores, spoke Arabic, French, Italian, and English, and read Hebrew. And there he was living in the inner city, a great candidate, and he had never heard of Yale. I worried that when these students, mostly second-generation immigrants from Europe or African Americans, visited Yale, they might be turned off by a bunch of self-involved Yale preppies. So we designed the day to be as practical as possible. The 80 students who came on the first visit would be broken into groups of 2 or 3, depending on their interests, and assigned to an undergraduate. They would visit labs or use the college broadcast studio. They would then discuss how to pay for their education at the admissions office. High schools were wary of having their students treated as tokens. We made sure these students knew that this path was not easy. They would have to compete for spots and apply to other schools as well. What mattered was they knew Yale was available to them. The boy from Cairo was eventually accepted and enrolled at Yale, and the program thrived long after I graduated. In my final year, I decided to take on the biggest issue of all for Yale's men, the 268-year-old parietal rules that forbade women staying overnight in a dorm room. I was dating a woman at a local college, so for me, it was as much a personal as a community issue. The conventional approach would have been to set up a meeting with a university administrator to try to change the situation. But I knew what would happen. He'd sit there in his blazer and bow tie and tell me women would be a distraction. It would stop the young men from studying. It would change the atmosphere in the college dorms. There was a long list of reasons that a young man like me wouldn't understand. He would smile and nothing would change, as it hadn't for almost 270 years. I needed a different approach, so I started with the students. I made a list of the university's likely objections and turned them into a long questionnaire. Do you think changing parietal rules will stop you from studying? Would having more women around be a distraction? And so on. I recruited 11 students to stand outside each of the 11 college dining halls during mealtimes and hand out the questionnaire to the entire undergraduate body. We had a response rate of close to 100%. Then I went to a friend, Reed Hunt, who was deputy editor of the Yale Daily News. He became head of the Federal Communications Commission under President Clinton. Reed, I got this survey about getting rid of parietal rules, I told him. It's dynamite. 3 days later, the parietal rules were history, and I made the front page of the school newspaper. Schwarzman's initiative, poll votes down parietals. The university didn't want to fight. It was my first lesson in the power of the media. Skull and Bones later tapped me to be a member, and I was put in charge of class day the following June. I would be the public face of Yale College's graduation ceremony. It had been some journey since my first lonely meal at Commons. Everything is interconnected.
Love it. So that was chapter number 1. Hopefully you enjoy that, small comments every now and then. The way that I see that is you'll just here to listen to the audiobook and just get a second opinion from someone who's in business, doing pretty much the same stuff that Stephen Schwarzman is doing, just on a smaller scale, much smaller scale at this point. So let me know in the comments if you like that, and I'll continue to do that. Like, here's the thing, I'm doing it anyway, so I think it's just awesome to have an opportunity. Like, I know when I listen to some of those books that are new to me, like new topics, like I'd love to hear some commentary from people to explain to me stuff that I don't understand. So that's the reason I'm doing this with everything related to like business, acquisitions, M&A, roll-ups. Let me know what you think. And I'm really looking forward to get to the point where we're talking about the actual business stuff, because this is kind of like, younger days. But yeah, again, let me know if you like that, and I'll continue to do those. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon.